Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Omega Insight. Tonight's topic is about intimacy. Now, the way I want to begin is talk about a recipe. In Omega 1, we ask if anybody knows how to bake a cake, and you follow a recipe. And on the recipes, they list every ingredient as well as the quantity of each ingredient that is needed. Now, to be successful, they also list the steps on what to do as you're preparing the cake. So let's say that you just happen to mix the oil, the eggs, and the vanilla and pour it in the pan, and then you sprinkle the flour and the baking soda on top of it and put it in the oven. Would you have a cake? Well, no, because the flour needs to be mixed in with all the other ingredients. And if we skip the order, you're not going to be able to bake the cake properly. Even though you have the ingredients, if you skip the order, the cake will not come out. So the order is necessary. Therefore, a recipe gives us the ingredients that are required, the amount of each ingredient, and the order in which they must be followed or added to the recipe. Now, imagine life as a recipe. Then, if we imagine that, what ingredients would you use? Perhaps maybe you would want love, compassion, understanding, or wisdom. Maybe I'm being a little bit idealistic. Perhaps maybe you want success, money, passion, romance, love, a house, vacation, family, friends, etc. Let's say whatever it is that you choose. Now, with this recipe, everything is, remember with the recipe, the ingredients, it's necessary how much we use of each ingredient. So imagine that we have this recipe, we could say, how much do we focus on success? Because we know if we do focus too much on one thing, another thing is going to suffer. So if we focus on success, perhaps maybe our family is going to suffer. Or if we focus too much on the excessiveness of a house, this huge house, we may not have enough money to pay the upkeep and the utilities and the maintenance. And if we don't have enough passion, we might just settle on romance and not feel like that's anything that we are driven for. Or again, same thing with if we spend so much time focusing our vacations, perhaps maybe we miss out on finding our purpose. Either way, it doesn't matter. The idea is how much do we spend on each ingredient? And then, of course, remember the scenario that we talked about before that it needs to have an order. So if we are going to follow through on the order of our life, what would be the first ingredient? Now, for me, no matter which ingredient which you select based upon your desires, there's only one and one thing that must be used: intimacy. Intimacy is absolutely imperative in any endeavor that we take on, whether it's romantic, whether it's my job, whether it's my children, whether it's my passion, writing, painting, singing songs, songwriting, whatever it is that we do, we must engage or have intimacy. It must be part of our agreement. Now, this sounds really beautiful. Intimacy is the first ingredient because intimacy, it's the prime force that binds the components of a recipe together. That's like the colors of the rainbow. They're intimate with them. The notes of a sonata, the elements of a successful business, the harmony of a partnership, the souls of lovers. All of it is because of intimacy. Now, this sounds beautiful, but what exactly is intimacy? Is it simply the distance? Is there an elephant, an element of disclosure? And are there boundaries that must be crossed? So I went to the definition. Obviously, the definition Webster defines intimacy as a close familiarity or friendship, and then a closeness. Now, don't let the word closeness fool you because the Earth is very intimate with the sun, and yet we're 93 million miles away. Common sense and science tells us if we're too close, we'll burn. If we're too far away, we'll just be a floating block of ice. That there's a balance, there's an intimacy between the distance of the Earth and the sun. So don't let distance, the word distance or closeness, confuse you when it comes to intimacy. It would be safe to say that intimacy is harmonious of blending two objects. It's the harmonious action of blending two objects, whether it's people, energies, ideas, to become one. Not literally, but in an intimate moment, you can't define the boundaries. On the lower levels, we obviously equate intimacy with sex. That's normal, it's a natural thing. We break the physical boundaries, we expose ourselves, and we share an intimate moment of ecstasy. At that moment, there's no time or space. It just is. We are at that moment. Emotionally, we have intimacy when we share our feelings and our we take risks that would be emotional. When I think about intimacy, I also think about the idea. We used to speak about this in the classroom, where the runner becomes the race, the musician becomes the music. These individuals are so intimate with the action they are doing, they no longer see the difference between themselves and the action. They become one. And I think it's quite powerful. I always think about the Olympics when this happens, people who are involved in breaking records. And Michael Phelps, he just loves to swim, and it becomes the race. He's in the water and he's not thinking about breathing and stroke. It all just becomes one. Everything falls into place. I'm assuming, I'm not speaking for Michael Phelps, but I'm assuming that's what must happen when we get ourselves engaged in intimate activities, when we're intimately engaged with our activities. So just as a musician becomes the music, the artist becomes the painting, the inventor becomes the idea, intimacy is required. Now, I want to back this up again and remind us that we're talking about intimacy in relationships. Intimacy, please hear this. Intimacy cannot be forced. You cannot force intimacy. Laws must be maintained. Forced intimacy is violence. And I'm not just talking physical. Forced intimacy is violence, and it shows in many different ways. You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot force someone to speak to you. You cannot force someone to be spending time with you. You cannot force an idea to manifest. You can't even force yourself to meditate. It has to be a connection and allowing that unfolds. When we attempt to enforce or force intimacy on an object or another individual or whatever task that is taking place, we become violent. And what ends up happening is we repel the object of our desire, whether it's an idea, the meditation, a sport, a romance, whatever it is. When we are attempting to force it, we repel that individual, we repel the idea, we repel whatever activity that we are involved in. And here's the most important thing to think about this. When we attempt to force and intimidate other individuals, we actually become imprisoned. We become imprisoned. And what does that look like? Well, it shows up in our behavior. We get angry easily because we're not getting what we want. So we get angry easily. We blow up. We are very sharp and vindictive with our words. We become judgmental. And at times we become judgmental and attack that which we are not being able to be intimate with. Well, this is stupid. Well, I don't want to do it. And we dismiss them and then dismiss and demean. Well, that was a waste of my time. That's what ends up happening when we are attempting to force our intimacy with whatever it is that we are engaging in. And this is hard to be around. When you're a person who attempts to force intimacy, you're a difficult person to be around. Nobody wants to be around that. And unfortunately, the more you desire intimacy, the more it will escape you. And you'll be left alone, empty, and hollow, which is, again, your prison. You, instead of living and engaging life, you're just existing, is what ends up happening. Now, if we think about this, if you wonder why people do not want to be intimate with you, it has to do with you, not the other person. It's the way you treat them. If they don't feel safe around you, they will not be intimate. If they feel like you're going to judge them, they will not be intimate. If they feel like that you are not going to accept them, they will not be intimate. So again, intimacy all comes down to you. If people are not intimate with you, it has to do with you. If you cannot achieve intimacy with your passion, with a project, again, with meditation, it has to do with you, not the object or the other individual. This is very important for us to recognize. It is a great suffering to be involved in a relationship who withholds intimacy. It really is. To withhold intimacy is violent, it's vindictive. It's not shared. It's a stop. It creates anger and all the things that I've mentioned. And actually, the more you withhold it, it will destroy a relationship. And I'm not just talking sexual. You can withhold emotionally, you can withhold physically and spiritually. You can just withhold yourself mentally. You don't talk to your putty anymore. You don't engage in conversations anymore. You don't share common interests, you don't enjoy their company. That's all has to do with intimacy. When you hold that back, it will destroy a relationship. Now, how can we spiritually be intimate? I talked about this a few weeks ago with faith. Faith is the idea that I surrender to something greater than me. And it could be a religion, it could be a philosophy, but then that's how we can engage our spiritual intimacy. So, the thing I'd like to leave you with is how powerful intimacy is. Intimacy creates life. If we just go physically, naturally, intimacy between a husband and a wife creates a child, a family unit, let's say. That's the physical aspect of intimacy. It creates the sperm and the egg, they create the baby. That's intimate. That's a very intimate act. We can also have intimacy with our ideas. Ideas are born out of intimacy. Again, everything that we do, and if we want to connect with it and be empowered by it and be successful, it requires intimacy. So I'd like to leave you with this thought. The greatest gift you can give yourself is to be intimate with yourself. I'll say that again. The greatest gift you can give yourself is to be intimate with yourself, to connect with that essence that lies within you, to awaken the voice of your soul, to harmoniously blend the greater part of you. That's why meditation is so powerful. When you meditate, we are harmoniously blending all aspects of me into one, and that is intimate. If for those of you who meditate, you understand what I mean. We can have a meditation and have it so impactful, but yet we can't share that because it was such an intimate thing. Words fail to define and describe the experience that we have. So again, the concept would be if the first ingredient in any endeavor that we do is intimacy, then it also applies to me. The greatest gift I can give myself is to be intimate with myself. Again, to connect with the essence that lies within me, to awaken the voice of my soul, and to harmoniously blend the greatest part of me with who I am today. Thank you for joining me this evening, and I hope that you are inspired to pursue more intimacy in your life. I look forward to seeing you next week when we talk about. So, the first ingredient was intimacy. Next week, I'm going to talk about the last ingredient that we must add. Until then, have a beautiful week. Bye now.